Welcome to Heroes of Might and Magic 3, No Unit Loss, Dungeons and Devils campaign. The rules are as follows. At the end of combat screen, no units can be lost. This includes summons. Dismissing/sacrificing units is not allowed. War machines count as units. This means ammo cart, ballista, first aid tent or catapult. Resurrection is allowed. Quick combat is allowed as a time saver. And scenarios are played at a recommended difficulty. I begin with the first scenario, a devilish plan. The objective is fairly straightforward. Defeat the Gold Dragon Queen, aka a single gold dragon guarded by 2 green dragon fights, hidden behind a green border gate, which has its keymaster's tent hidden behind a red border gate. We also face off against red, who starts with 4 towns. A pretty uneven start compared to my single starting town. Red does not have to be defeated to win this scenario though. I start off with Pyre and get Marius from the tavern, which is quite nice. Pyre starts off with a ballista, which is extremely useful in early fights. As mentioned in the Long Live the Queen video, the AI just loves to focus the 250 HP ballista, making it a nice tank. Here I fight a bunch of Gnoll Marauders, and due to the split in the stacks caused by the terrain, I take out the top 3 stacks using both my Hellhounds and the ballista. Then I just stay out of range of the Gnolls with my Hellhounds until they are low enough to finish them off. A fairly straightforward beginning. On day 2, I make sure to stop by the Red Keymaster's tent, which I have forgotten to do early a million times in practice runs. It is no big deal to forget it, however, as I have plenty of time to pick it up later. I just try to avoid the annoyance. I also flag a neutral rampart town, but I can't build anything in it, so it just serves as gold income. The early strategy, since I start off extremely resource rich, is to build a fire lake. After the fire lake, next on the list is the Forsaken Palace, in order to recruit devils. To do this, I need Mercury. And to get Mercury, I first need to flag the Alchemist Lab to the north. When I eventually, and by eventually I mean quite quickly, get devils, it's time to basically just run over red, as they never really build up their army in this scenario. I use the same Hellhound Ballista strategy against some skeletons, dwarves and pikemen, taking advantage of my Hellhound's higher speed stat to kite neutral units around. Beating the pikemen gives me access to the Alchemist Lab, and I now have Mercury income. On day 7, I have the 20 Mercury I need to build the Forsaken Palace. Building this on day 7 nets me 1 extra devil compared to waiting until next week. And with these 2 devils on week 2 day 1, it's time to wreak some havoc. I recruit all the available Erathia as well, keep the devils on Marius, and trade the Erathia over to Pyre, so they both can do fights. Clearing the map and taking out red early leaves me more resources and fewer chances of losing any units, making it more efficient to use both heroes to take fights, flag mines, and pick up resources. Using the devils, I quickly take out some Grand Elves, Red Hero Vokial, and some Thunderbirds, getting access to a hill fort, which lets me upgrade my units at the same costs as in a town, but without the need to upgrade the creature dwelling, saving some resources. I upgrade Marius' devils and Pyre's Erathia as well. I take out the first and second of Red's 4 towns, a rampart town in the north and a castle town in the middle of the map. High level units this early, upgraded as well, are just too overpowered if you ask me. The very next day I take advantage of Pyre's map mobility to take Red's second castle town as well. If you're wondering why I'm not discussing my skill choices on level ups, it's because I don't plan on using these heroes in the final scenario. The strategy I intend on using requires dungeon heroes, for a few reasons I can come back to in the next scenario. But I can say that having logistics on Pyre has made this map quite a bit easier to explore. Already on week 2 day 7, Red is vanquished. If you haven't figured it out already, the AI is an absolute joke in this scenario. The only possible challenge here is the green dragons guarding the Gold Dragon Queen, and their numbers are variable, meaning that sometimes they're quite easy and sometimes they pose a bit of a challenge. My objective now is just to gather up enough archdevils to be able to fight the green dragons. In previous attempts, 8 archdevils have been enough, so I basically stay in town waiting until I've recruited all the 8 archdevils required. Green dragons, like red dragons, are immune to level 1 to 3 spells, so a level 4 or 5 damage spell would be helpful. But since I intend on using Marius for these fights, and Marius doesn't have wisdom, because I skipped it, I don't build up the magic guilds looking for good spells. Both guard fights are against a low number of green dragons, 5 in the first fight and 8 in the second fight. Previous attempts have had as high as 14 in both fights, so this is a fair bit easier. Because of their low numbers, I can just quick combat through the fights, making it a slight bit anticlimactic. Nevertheless, the final fight is against the Gold Dragon Queen. Using my tactical brilliance and combat intelligence, I maneuver deftly around the battlefield and just one-shot her. Not much of a challenge here so far, but the hard part is yet to come. A certain General Morgan Kendall is waiting in the final scenario. But before we get that far, we have to get through scenario number 2, groundbreaking. This time, I don't have the option of continuing using the heroes from the previous scenario, like in Long Live the Queen. Playing as Dungeon, our hero classes are a bit different. Dungeon heroes are either Overlords, who are might based, or Warlocks, who are magic based. I soft reset a few times looking for a good Warlock for a few reasons. 1. My final scenario strategy is heavily magic based. 2. Warlocks have a higher chance of getting +1 to spell power instead of other stats on level ups, until level 9, making my spells more effective. And 3. Warlocks have a decent chance of getting earth magic, which will be extremely relevant in the final scenario. And a bunch of other secondary skills I want, like intelligence, sorcery, and air magic. In the end, I get the Warlock Jediite, who is the best choice, because it starts off with the spell Resurrection, and no useless other secondary skill, like Deemer with Scouting for example. I could always get this spell from a level 4 magic guild, but I'd rather not risk not getting it. I also get Gunner, an Overlord with logistics as a specialty, from the Tavern, which will help my map exploration abilities. The early scenario strategy is to build up to a Dragon Cave by the end of week 2. The bottleneck here is sulfur, and I don't have any sulfur mines available close to me, so instead I build up to a resource silo as early as possible, netting me +1 sulfur a day. This is also why I chose the Pillar of Ice as a scenario bonus, literally just to save 1 sulfur as it costs 1 of each resource. Using the red dragons I get by doing this, I can go to the overworld and start clearing out Red's towns. Like in the first scenario, Red starts off with 4 towns in practically the same overworld locations. 1 in the middle, and then 1 in the northwest corner, 1 in northeast, and 1 in southwest. Until then, I use the second best option, Manticores. The problem here, compared to the first scenario, is that a lot of the possible and sometimes necessary fights are against ranged units like Evil Eyes and Medusa Queens. These are instances where the spell power of a Warlock is extremely good, using magic arrows to whittle down the ranged units, waiting on my turn so I don't take full range damage, and then targeting the units in a way to spread out the damage on my 1-stack Manticores. If I'm careless, the AI will focus them down one by one. Picking up the shield, Buckler of the Knoll King, which gives me +4 defense, makes future fights like these much safer as well. This Medusa Queen fight in particular is actually much more difficult than it looks. I start off by magic arrowing the middle Medusa Queen. A Medusa Queen has 30 HP, so 2 magic arrows will be enough to kill the middle 3-unit stack. Since having a unit next to an opposing ranged unit stops them from shooting, the strategy is to keep 1 Manticore in the middle of the 2 top queens and 1 in the middle of the 2 bottom ones. The Manticore, which was targeted in round 1, is not especially healthy, but neither will any of my other Manticores be if I don't juggle their targets around a bit. I purposefully don't attack with the 3rd Manticore in order to take less retaliation damage. Every turn I need to use Magic Arrow to slowly whittle down the Medusa Queens. Not attacking with the bottom Manticore pays off, and I get a little bit lucky, as it survives with just 3 HP. A little bit of positioning trickery, quite a bit of luck with not getting turned to stone, and I make it out of this fight alive. Probably the toughest fight in the first 2 campaigns, so far. The neutral dungeon towns I'm flagging are mostly just for gold and sulfur income, as well as giving me better trading ratios, which you will get by having more marketplaces built. I make sure to also flag different resource mines, as later in the scenario I will build up the magic guilds looking for a few different spells to make the last scenario possible, namely Meteor Shower, Chain Lightning, Implosion, Town Portal, Dimension Door, and Fly. I don't expect to get all of these, but at least getting a couple of them would be extremely useful. I've mentioned the secondary skills I want, but why do I want them? With Earth Magic, should I get any of the Earth spells, Meteor Shower, Implosion, and Town Portal, I get to cast them at a reduced cost, and in the case of the first two, increased damage as well. Having at least Advanced Earth also makes it so Resurrection fully revives units I cast it on, not just temporarily in combat. Advanced Earth also lets me choose which of my towns I get to Town Portal to, not just automatically portaling to the closest one. Air Magic reduces Chain Lightning's cost and also increases its damage. Expert Air Magic also lets me Dimension Door up to 4 times each turn, making me extremely mobile. Higher level Air Magic reduces terrain penalty when using Fly as well. Very useful. Intelligence increases my spell points, aka mana. This, combined with Mana Vortex, gives me a huge mana pool, making it possible for me to focus solely on getting plus spell power, therefore getting stronger spell casting. Sorcery increases my spell damage. Sorcery plus Earth Magic plus a lot of spell power plus an artifact in the last scenario guarantees me one-shotting a certain stack of units with a certain spell as well. Other skills which would be nice would be armor and logistics, but they're not necessary, just useful. Alright, enough talking, time for some action. It's week 3, day 1, and I have a whole 2 red dragons waiting in my main town. With Jediite, I take the 2 dragons, trade over the Manticores to Gunner, which leaves his 1 harpy in the closest town, and it's time to assault the overworld. Like in the first scenario, red is not giving me much of a fight. Jediite takes care of the middle castle town and heads for the northeast rampart town. Along the way there, I stop by the hill fort to upgrade to black dragons. Now, I'm unstoppable. I make sure to not flag the southwest tower town, for a good reason, which will be apparent later. After taking out Yuland, who was trying to take back the rampart town, I check the tavern to see if red has fewer heroes than I have, which they do, so I know they only have 1 hero, who even is visible to me. Hence, I can head straight for the northwestern castle town without risking losing any of the other towns I've flagged. Astral is the final real battle in this scenario, and even managed to kill 1 black dragon in the quick combat, meaning I have to manually beat his butt. I suspect the griffins were the problem, so I lightning bolt to reduce their numbers a bit. Astral is silly enough to line up his units for Dragon Breath, so I, of course, take advantage of this. Moving out of his reach gives me another turn of free spellcasting. Lightning bolting the halberdiers leaves no more threats from Astral's units, and this fight is free from here on out. After reaching the castle town, red has bought out every unit they can, but I can simply quick combat my way to victory. This leaves only the town Gunner is guarding. The AI refuses to build up this town, however, so I have as much time in the world to do what I want from here. Skipping ahead a bit, what I did was flagging as many mines I could, taking as many fights I could to level up Jediite to the scenario max of 12, and building up the magic guilds in my dungeon towns, 1 castle town and the rampart town, looking for the spells I mentioned earlier. After visiting these towns, I simply flagged the last remaining red town without a fight to secure the scenario victory. Alright, the real challenge begins. The objective of this scenario is to take Steadwick, a heavily guarded castle town in the middle of the map, guarded by General Kendall, who starts off with a lot of stats and a big army. I need to take the town within 3 months, but actually 4 as you get 4 extra weeks during the scenario, meaning I cannot take my time to build up an infinitely big army, but I still need a big enough army to take on the general. This scenario, as you will notice by all my preparations, planning and explaining, is essentially a puzzle-solving scenario. First, I make sure to choose the dungeon heroes from the second scenario. Now, let's take stock of what we have so far on Jediite, my main hero. Expert Wisdom, Expert Air, Expert Intelligence, Expert Sorcery, and just Basic Earth. This is not a bad skill tree at all, pretty much everything I asked for, but not having at least Advanced Earth is a bit of an inconvenience. I need Advanced Earth to be able to do a very important neutral fight. Spells wise, I have Fly as a mobility spell, but missing Town Portal and Dimension Door. As Town Portal is probably the best spell in the game, I need to get my hands on this as soon as possible. Of the damage spells I wanted, I have all of them. Overall, I'm in a great position. Now, how do I get Town Portal? Well, this scenario is actually quite forgiving in this regard, as in the bottom right corner of the underground, there is a random relic artifact. That means I can get the strongest stat boosting artifacts like Helm of Heavenly Enlightenment, Sword of Justice, and Titan's Cuirass. Utility artifacts like Angel Wings, artifacts like Orb of Vulnerability I can make for some creative strategies I'm pretty sad I didn't get to use. And most importantly, spell tomes that give me all the spells of a certain type. In this case, I need the Earth Tome so I get access to all Earth spells, including Town Portal. But it's guarded by several black dragons, so I can't just waltz in and grab it. As black dragons are immune to magic as well, I need a sizable army to take them on. So the early strategy is to amass a big enough army to kill the black dragons. In the same corner, there's also a red dragon dwelling, meaning I can flag this, build a summoning portal, and this, combined with castle and dragon cave in my dungeon town, I can get +5 red dragons every week. Getting all of this in week 1 is practically impossible, so the aim is to have all of this built and the red dragon dwelling flagged by the end of week 2. A bit of a challenge indeed. Due to my level and stat farming in the previous scenario, along with getting all the damage spells I wanted, I can use Jedi to take on a bunch of the nearby fights using only a Harpy stack to get access to mines and resources. Chain Lightning and Meteor Shower especially are really useful. I avoid taking fights against ranged units, as the Harpies are way too weak to tank multiple hits from any type of unit, so it's almost a guarantee to lose at least one Harpy in these fights. On day 5, however, I build a Manticore lair, trade the 2 Manticores over to Jedi, and this opens up the opportunity to take on pretty much every nearby fight, except the Black Dragons. Compared to the Medusa Queen fight in the last scenario, this fight is an absolute breeze. Stronger spellcasting is so good. Using magic arrows instead of meteor showers is just to save mana, by the way, so I don't have to return to town to replenish my mana too often. In the middle of week 2, I start heading back to the dungeon town with Jedi and leave all the Manticores on Gunner, so he can take fights in the overworld. On week 2, day 4, I build a dragon cave and get my first red dragon. Still not having advanced earth, I'm hopeful that the next level up nets me just that I can take on the black dragons very soon. Taking the red dragon dwelling is easy with proper spellcasting, but it's starting to get critical. I need advanced earth. I decide to take on the earth elementals slightly north of my dungeon town and cross my fingers. Yes, finally. Now, when I get the next batch of red dragons, I'll say hi to the black dragons. It takes me until week 3, day 3 to finally get Jedi's butt down to the black dragons. But when I finally get there, they want to join me? In hindsight, it was probably a really stupid idea to decline this, as I could have traded them over to Gunner and taken a bunch of slightly more difficult fights with him. But what's done is done. The fight itself highlights what is going to be my late game strategy, resurrecting red dragons. If you have paid attention, I haven't once mentioned I will be getting black dragons, for this simple reason. They are immune to magic, and therefore they cannot be resurrected. This is why, if I had all the spells I needed for my wishlist from the previous scenario, the Orb of Vulnerability would have been so much fun. Since it renders all natural magic immunity useless, I could have resurrected black dragons instead. Such a waste of potential here. Now that I have Town Portal though, the map really opens up for me. I upgrade Gunner's Manticores to Scorpicores, so he can take more fights, and start exploring more with Jedi. Fairly close to me, there are 2 of Red's castle towns. The most important one is the one slightly northwest of me, as it is closer to Steadwick, and usually have some curious heroes wanting to invade my territory, which the southwestern town does not. The castle town is guarded by a single imp, so no challenge there. The nice thing about castle towns is the ability to build the stables, which gives me more movement for visiting heroes the rest of the week, and that is always useful. Before I go on the last offensive, I have a few objectives in mind. First, the cartographer inside the closed-off Steadwick zone. In order to get access to this, I either need to pass through a garrison, which has a large castle army defending it, or use fly to move over the terrain. Usually, I would like the experience from the garrison fight, but the garrisons surrounding the Steadwick zone are anti-magic zones, meaning it's practically impossible to not lose any units. Secondly, inside the zone is another random relic artifact as well, and depending on which one it is, I would love to get it. It is always guarded by archangels, and for some reason, Red never tries to get this artifact. In this run, it's an air tome, which is just amazing, as it gives me the last spell for my wishlist. dimension door. The third and fourth mini objectives are a library in the southwest, which gives +2 to all stats on level 10 or higher heroes, then Orb of Silt. This is the artifact which lets me one-shot General Kendall's champion stack with Implosion, as it gives +50% earth spell damage. So good. In the meantime, I take out the heroes Hallen and Khalid, who both have notable armies, and then set my sights on the Air Tome. Without Resurrection, the Archangel fight would be pretty much impossible to do without losses. With Resurrection, one cast and some well-placed Dragonfire makes this fight a breeze. The power of good spells is just incredible. I also make sure to take on the Griffin Conservatory, which nets me 3 Angels. The plan is to trade them over to Gunnar and let him take some fights to the north, collecting whatever useful resources and/or artifacts he comes over. After taking the southwestern castle town, visiting the library and getting the Orb of Silt, I also decide to take the northwestern town. In previous runs, 23 red dragons have been enough to take on the general, so I have some time to kill, 1 week. So I figured I might as well take this town as well. But then something completely new happens. Red has traded all their marksmen over to someone other than General Kendall. This has literally never happened before to me. Of course, I take advantage of this, as it would make the final fight much easier. A couple of well-placed spellcasts, and the marksmen are history. Will this be the easiest run yet? Now, it's just a waiting game until I have all the red dragons I need. With my 23 dragons, I stand just outside Steadwick's gates, waiting to be attacked as my army should be small enough for the AI to just attack me. But the general never comes out. This also never happens. Is it the lack of marksmen that keeps him inside the gates? I decide to attack him in Steadwick, just to show off why I want to be attacked. I get to show off why Implosion is so good as well, one-shotting the champions. But I also show off the problem with sieging, the catapults. It always gets destroyed in this fight. And as it is a war machine, counting as a unit, I can't be on the offensive here. I need to fight outside the town. So I reload, deciding to get more red dragons. But then I see it. General Kendall left the town? This opens up an opportunity. I can just dimension door over to the barely guarded town, flagging it. It is a bit cheesy, but it gets the job done. However, this is not what I'm about, if I can help it. So while I did manage to do this without unit losses, I want that final fight. I reload all the way back to before I take out Christian with all the marksmen, hoping this would make the AI think it's strong enough to attack me outside the town. Which works, but this doesn't mean the fight is straightforward. I need a specific battlefield layout. The layout changes depending on which tile I stand on, so I move around outside Steadwick looking for the perfect one. In the end, it turns out the perfect tile is the one next to the windmill, and I get to be the attacker. So what is the point of this battlefield layout, you ask? Well, at the bottom there is a puddle of water which narrows the walking path to just 1 hex. If I place my dragons there, I can only be melee attacked by 2 units at once, instead of at least 3 if I place the dragons in a corner. If the dragons were 1 hex units, I could place them in the right corners for the same effect, but this is not the case. After taking out the zealots with Implosion, as they are ranged, what I need to do now is whittle down the slowest of the 2 units attacking me, Griffins in this case. If I tried to keep the champion stack low, I would kill them with my dragons with retaliation, as they attack before the Griffins. Since I will never retaliate against the Griffins as long as the champions are alive, I take less damage per turn, making it possible to resurrect more dragons than I lose. With this perfect scenario created, I take out the Crusaders with another well-placed Implosion, as the Crusaders do a ton of damage. Now, there are no threats left. His unit count is now more than low enough for my dragons to survive several hits in a row, allowing me to resurrect way more dragons than I lose. Since both his other units are trapped by the ballista, meaning they can't walk around and behind my dragons, I can finally take out the Griffins and then the champions. Resurrect, attack. Resurrect, attack. General Kendall tries desperately blessing his cavaliers to at least kill some dragons, but I have pretty much infinite mana with the intelligence plus mana vortex combo. I'll never run out of resurrects in this fight. Poor guy has no chance now. I finally move forward to hit his forever passive Naga Queens. I felt bad for them. They had to get involved at some point too. Shame that such a strong unit had such little impact. Good for me though. To rub salt in the wound, I even take out his ballista. One final resurrect, and boom! The general is down. I repeat, the general is down. And just for the fun of it, I make a fool out of Christian again. One final siege against the hero-less Steadwick. Now I feel like a deserved conqueror of this campaign, taking Steadwick in 2 different ways without losing any units. While I don't love using resurrection strategies, I'm not sure how I would do this without them. What I can say is that the next campaign in Restoration of Erathia most likely does not include resurrection, unless I get really creative. Who knows? Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like or a comment. I appreciate it more than you know. Have a great day.